Just as everyone streams in, actually, can I ask you this? How much say do you get over how the covers look on your books? Because
Um,
they're pretty
it,
cool.
they are cool, but it's interesting because I have said to them, I get these comments from people saying they look more like thrillers than cozy crime, which they're
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
more cozy crime, and it's kind of misleading. So, in fact, they've decided on the next book to lean into more cozy crime on the cover.
Will there be like a cinnamon roll on the cover or something like that?
There may be a cinnamon roll on the cover. There
Um,
may be.
good morning, Ian. Ian, old friend from England. Welcome to Ben's Book Club, everybody who's just entering. If this is your first time, you might see in the chat that we invite everybody to say hello and where they're from. It's one of the really fun parts of doing this is that we get to see just where everybody's from around the country, but also overseas. We always get a few people from overseas, which is pretty exciting. Um, so welcome everybody. Welcome Coffs Harbour, sunny coast. Lael, did you get the weird weather the last couple of days? It's been super hot and then really rainy. Like it's just been really strange. Um, Joan, where are you at actually? Come to think of it.
I'm in the
Oh, the
Southern
Southern
Highlands.
Highlands. Of course, it's in your bio.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm right here, and it's we've had a return to winter.
Yeah, that's what my mum's been saying too in Victoria at least, is that it's just been miserable and cold and
Mm.
yeah, we had a really strange yeah, it was like a heat wave and then it just all died. It was very strange. Hi Patricia from the Noosa, Catherine from Sunny Coast. Yeah, was so Gemma's saying was sweating 2 days ago and now I've got the electric blanket on. It's like Melbourne, right, Gemma? Remember Melbourne just up and down? Hi Jennifer, hi Joanne. Hello everybody. Let's get into things though. Just as everyone comes in, let's read out Joan's bio and then we'll get stuck into our chat today, which I'm really excited for. So, Joan Sawyers is born in New York, screenwriter, producer, and author who worked in London, Los Angeles, and New York before finally settling in Australia. And she has lectured in screenwriting in Sydney, London, Paris, Berlin, and Casablanca. It's one of the fanciest guests we've ever had in my life. Return guest. She has had 14 books published in Australia, the US, India, and Japan. And she's been a script editor on films, including The Babadook and TV shows Rake and The Principal. Has written many screenplays. And most recently, Joan was a writer on the ABC series Wakefield and Ladies in Black. And this one sounds really interesting, a sci-fi romance created by her daughter, as well as her next Southern Highlands mystery. And you live in the Southern Highlands and have your daughter and two grandsons, which is remarkable. So, ladies and gentlemen, we can put our emojis in the chat for Joan. Welcome, Joan. Welcome back. Good to have
Thank
you
you.
back.
It's so much fun to be back. I loved it last time. I love all of the input from your viewers, listeners, your
Yes.
participants.
I often think that they're much smarter than I am, and I just sit back and read their questions because they are pretty brilliant. Um, what can you tell us about this sci-fi romance? This sounds really
Uh,
interesting. And your daughter's a writer too. You must be so proud.
I am so proud. I feel like I've passed the torch. No, she's actually the TV show that we were working on, the sci-fi romance, we put on the back burner because she suddenly got very busy writing her own YA paranormal romance
Oh,
called Black River, which has just been published in Australia and is about to be published overseas
oh
everywhere.
wow.
But
I mean, that's
yeah,
huge. That's awesome.
she's fantastic. So she and I bounce ideas off each other all the time because we've got a kind of Gilmore Girls thing going, and also we she lives in the main house. I live in the little carriage house, and I help look after her grandchildren. I mean,
Uh,
sorry, I look after her children, who are my grandchildren.
yeah.
Uh, and basically, I try to steal as many of her ideas as I can. So, yeah,
Yeah, well, it's actually a funny thing when you think about you two work in, I would assume, just very different genres, yet
yeah,
stories. I mean, you've also worked on the Babadook and you've written in a lot of different fields, but there's obviously stories sort of cross-pollinate. Like what do
yeah.
you sort of where do they cross-pollinate? Like, where are they the same, and then where are they different? That's a good question.
Well, it's interesting for both of us. The environment, the atmosphere of our books is really important. The physical, especially the natural world, and we
Mm.
both dark, gloomy forests feature in both of our books. But it's also like, when she was growing up, I used to take her on trips to upstate New York. We used to spend summers in the mountains, in the forest there. But I also took her to places like Edinburgh and the Highlands of Scotland, and
Wow.
just sort of indoctrinated her basically in all my favorite kind of Gothic literature. And, I was giving her Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde when she was about 8 years old. So clearly I'm responsible.
Yeah, you really you raised her right, clearly.
I raised her
Raised
right.
her up in the way she should go. Um, so just before we get too much further along, it would be remiss of me to not say that, and Joan, I'm sorry to put you on the spot a little bit with this, but what we do with Ben's Book Club, we focus on the very best question of the night. And what we love to do is connect our readers and people all over Australia and the world with, authors and sort of further the author. We want to get Joan's name out there and her books into as many hands as possible, but we also want to connect because I think reading's about connection. So, in order to incentivize you all to be writing the very best questions for Joan, which we'll be reading out as we go along, we are offering to send not this copy. I got a special one. Look, uncorrected proof. Yeah. So we're going to send a final copy of Whiskey Valley, a paper copy, to the what Joan decides or who Joan decides has asked the very best question. So make sure you type your questions into the chat, and we'll get to as many of them as we can, and then we'll send a Whiskey Valley, which does look really good on the shelf, especially next to Echo Lake. Actually, you know what? Speaking of that, Echo Lake, as far as I'm aware, that was your first fiction novel, or novel, I
It,
should say.
yeah, it was my first fiction book. I actually have written now 17 books that have been published here, but most of them were. I did a biography of the Everly Brothers. That was my very first book, and then a lot of sort of advice books on relationships, healthcare, that sort of thing. And
Hmm.
then, but Echo Lake was definitely the first novel. And
Yeah.
frankly, I don't want to write anything but novels from now
Yeah. Well, I was wondering what you learned from the process of writing that particular book that you then sort of brought with you into writing Whiskey Valley. And I imagine there's some differences between even your work in TV as well. But what lessons did Echo Lake teach you about the process of writing?
on. Echo Lake taught me that I never want to do any screenwriting ever again.
Oh.
Basically, that's what it taught me. That it's so
Wow.
much more fun to immerse yourself in writing a novel because you can get inside all your characters' heads. And I
Mm.
think, and it's something that because as a screenwriter, you can just describe what people are going to see on screen. You can't tell them what the characters are thinking. So when
Mm.
you write a novel, obviously you have that internal dialogue or monologue that you can play with. And you can also basically write big budget. So, in other words, when you're writing a screenplay, like I used to
Yeah.
write for Heartbreak High, you had to write for only things that could happen within the school or in, two characters' house. When you're writing a novel, you can let your imagination go crazy. You can design the most beautiful
Mm.
houses with expensive artwork, and that's what I did in Whiskey Valley. I think what Echo Lake taught me was that in the next book I could take it even further. So in Echo Lake, the locations I describe are often, Rose's little cottage, and it's all sort of modest in scale. And then in Whiskey Valley, I thought, no, spend some money on the production design, basically, which you can do in a novel. So, for instance,
Mm.
her psychologist that she goes to visit in Whiskey Valley, he has an original Arthur Boyd painting on his wall, and he lives in this fantastic house. And the one of the main characters owns a $10 million Italian violin, and
Yeah.
So basically, what I realized was that anything I could imagine, I didn't have to stop myself from describing it in
Yeah.
because you can just go anywhere.
You can go
And
off. Yeah.
so, in fact, in the next book, which comes out next June, I have Rose on the hunt of a serial killer because
Oh,
I,
wow.
I yeah, because I didn't tackle that in the first two books, and then I thought, hey, I can do this. I can invent whatever I want. So
That's
yeah.
wow. I mean, I'm sorry to, that's just really interesting to me. A cozy crime serial killer. You know what I
Well,
mean? Like,
I'll
how
tell
have you
you,
done?
it's a cold case. So
Ah,
what
okay.
what I decided was what I really wanted to do with Rose in the third book because um, she's a historian, but her all the work she does to figure out who done it in the first two books is really not using her historical practice. She's just using
Yeah.
her instincts as a human being who's curious,
Mm,
who follows the scent, and she's good at talking. People open up to her, and that's really how she sort of solves things. But then I thought in the third book, why not have some sort of historical thing, a
mm.
historical crime, which she doesn't even know is a crime, uh, until she starts doing her historical work on it. So
Wow.
at the beginning of the next book, it is very cozy, in other words. So she starts out because she's been bequeathed the historical artifacts from a stately home that has died out, and is sifting through all this material when she discovers something strange in a box in the attic.
That's cool. That sounds exciting.
Anyway, so it is cozy crime, but it is indeed about a serial killer.
Smart. I feel like you sound really excited about it, which is really exciting. Like it's really fun to have that nearing where everyone can read it, right? Um, I've got a great question. Speaking of cozy crime, I have a great question from Gemma. Does Joan live in a cabin in the woods or have a weekender? I feel like I would definitely book that on Airbnb, especially if the local cafe is real. I can taste the cinnamon bun now. So,
Oh,
do you open your home?
no, in fact, it's so funny because I don't live in Berrima where Rose has her little cozy cottage, but I do have a little cozy cottage. It's not even that little. I mean, you can see my lounge room is enormous, but I live in an actual converted carriage house. So I'm in the carriage house at the sort of back of the property of my daughter's bigger house, and
Wow.
we're in Burrawang, which is where the pub that I talk about in Echo Lake, um,
Oh
and
yeah.
whether I mention it in Whiskey Valley. I don't think I do mention it. Anyway, I live there. But I unfortunately I don't open my house to Airbnb. But if Gemma wants to wander down the street, there aren't that many houses in Burway. But I've had so many people ask me about this cafe, the Manic Cafe, and the
Yeah.
cinnamon buns. And unfortunately, I took the inspiration for that from a place called the Manic Cafe in Bundina, which is actually on the coast, where I
Ah.
where I lived before I moved to the Southern Highlands.
Oh.
There's no Manic Cafe here. There is one that has great cinnamon buns in Bundina, but it doesn't look anything like I describe it in the book.
All right, well, hang on. I'm going to, so sorry. You said Bundina. What was it called?
Yeah, Bundina has a Manic Cafe.
Mana
Uh,
Cafe.
Yeah, but it has good cinnamon buns, but unfortunately, it doesn't look as nice as mine in the book.
Well, I mean, you've got no budget, so you can just build whatever you
Exactly.
like in your
I
mind, right?
know.
It's perfect. Um, so Gemma has said hashtag stalker now, so you might have done yourself a disservice there. I'm sorry about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Looking forward, Gemma.
Um, there's a lot of interesting questions here, so I'm just reading through a couple of them. I don't know whether you can see them, and it's obviously that's okay if
Yes.
you can't. Just if you ever want to just chime in, feel free. I guess this is maybe a good one from Mandy. This is a great one to start. Did you plan to actually write this sequel as you were writing Echo Lake? Like as you were writing, were you like, "Oh, I really want to see what Rose does next"?
Yes, the short answer is absolutely. In fact, when I first pitched the idea of a series to the publisher, I said, I know what Rose is going to be doing 9, 10 books from now.
Wow,
And,
really?
and, and the publisher was like, whoa, simmer down, Joan. Just go, we'll see how the first book goes.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I was originally going to make Rose my age, which is I'm nearly 72. And then I thought, wait a minute, I better make her a lot younger because I need to give her a longer runway if I have all these other books planned. Um, and with Whiskey Valley, when I was writing Echo Lake, I knew I wanted to have the next book be about sort of set in the world of classical music and in the world of classical musicians and
Mm.
all the sort of intrigues and dramas that go on within classical music because of a TV series I had worked on years ago that never got made. But I had done all this research and
Oh, fair
sat in
enough.
a lot of classical musicians and traveled all over Australia with different symphony orchestras. And I had all this knowledge and I have a love of classical music, a real passion for it. And especially I'm fascinated with the whole history of those amazingly valuable instruments, the ones by
Mm.
Stradivarius and all that, and there's such a lot of wonderful intrigue and detail around the way those instruments were made and why they're so valuable. And I just thought it'd be a great, sort of, what Hitchcock called the MacGuffin, the thing that goes missing that everyone's looking for.
Yeah, we've got a lot of comments in the Facebook group, but also here, just really love the classical music element, and that's really interesting too. That you'd done all this research, and then you sort of got to it wasn't wasted, And I guess you don't know where something. Are there any other elements from any other projects in Whiskey Valley that you sort of stole and stuck into this one?
Absolutely. Everything. In fact, because as a screenwriter, 90% of what you develop in the screenwriting world for film and television doesn't get made. Everything goes into development, and then 1/10 of those things get produced.
Mm.
So, in the meantime, writers like me, we have all of this research that we've done for other projects. So, for instance, I think in Echo Lake, I talk about Rose. It's one reason I made her a historian because I figure all her research assignments can be things I've already researched.
That's smart. You're smart.
I'm not as dumb as I look, Ben. So I, I like in Echo Lake. I think the project she's working on in the beginning, doing research for, is supposedly about a documentary about the children of the First Fleet, and that's actually a screenplay that I wrote 20 years ago, that was in
Wow.
development and it was going to get made as a movie. And then they decided it would be too expensive and kids' movies weren't doing that well and blah, blah. Anyway, so I sort of now what I do is I cherry pick
Mm.
my files. I have file cabinets full of research files that I've made for other projects, and I give those to Rose as her assignments. Like in is it? Oh no, it's in the next book. I have her researching Australian women fashion designers of the 1960s, and that's actually taken from some research I did for Ladies in Black, which I was one of the writers on for the TV series.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah.
Can I ask this question of you? It strikes me that you're a person who perseveres, and I think it's really easy as a creative person to get really quite dejected when it just doesn't seem to go ahead. And I guess how have you honed that perseverance muscle? I mean, is it always just shrug it off and move on to the next thing, or does it hurt a bit, or how do you do that?
You know, I'm not, it's funny because I do think perseverance is the absolute key to success. I mean, Tom Cruise says it all the time, winners are people who didn't give up or people who make it work. And the thing about writing is, especially as a screenwriter, you learn that, look, 90% of the stuff you write is never going to happen. But it doesn't mean those ideas are bad. And I think allowing yourself that sort of, permission to fail, or not to fail, but just not to get something made, it
Mm,
also gives you permission to, keep that idea in your head and, maybe use it later on in another form, like I've done with my work. I mean, most writers I know cannibalize their own work. Often, just even earlier books that they've written, they'll
mhm.
take a character or a location or, and create a spin-off. Um,
I take names. Names is something I take
oh
from
yeah.
down projects.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Because
yeah,
names are tricky.
they
Names are
are.
sort of hard. And when you find it, when you have a good one, you run with it. But I think the other reason that I have just learned to persevere and that it's the only way to do it is I have always so desperately wanted to avoid getting a real job that I've just had to make it work as a writer. It's like, I don't want to do anything else but be a writer because it's so much fun.
Jeez.
You can do it at home. You can do it in your pajamas, and I've been determined to make it work so I can keep the lifestyle.
Oh, I love that. I love hearing that. Um, so I've got a couple of questions that are bordering on some spoilers. So just so everyone's really aware, this is a book club. The theory is that we've all actually read the whole book. So there will be some questions that do border into, oh, are you, yep, are you shocked, Joan? Oh, sorry.
No, no, no. I'm thrilled. I mean, I'd be amazed if everyone had read it, but I'd be thrilled. And
That's the theory. I think most people have. We normally do pretty well. Normally all of us read it. But Jennifer asks this, and this is of the sequel. Is Diego coming back?
yeah, I mean, Diego, okay, I'm glad we can talk about this because in other talks I've done, I have to avoid the Diego subject. So if everyone has read Whiskey Valley, you'll know that Rose and Diego go their separate
I
ways.
couldn't believe you did that to us, by the way. Couldn't believe it.
Well, it's funny because I have sort of long-term plans for Rose, but they may change because so many people have said to me, like they've gotten really mad about getting rid of Diego. And
Yes.
they've said he is coming back because like you have to bring him back. And
It's a
I'm
bit
like, well,
unfair, Joan. You created a perfect man, and then you said goodbye, perfection. Like it's
well,
uncool. I don't even.
the good thing is I don't want to give too much away about
No, no,
future
yeah, of
books.
course, of course.
However, you will get more information about Diego in the next book, and there will be even
Okay.
more in the one after. So we're not saying
Ooh,
goodbye completely to Diego.
ooh, I like
If I
hearing this.
were really getting rid of him, I'd have killed him. So
Oh no, I don't like that you said that as even an option. Can I also say to you, Joan, you're not allowed to give him some sort of weird skeleton in his closet, all right? If we read the next one and if he's a serial killer, I don't even know what I'm gonna do.
well, when my publisher was reading the manuscript for Whiskey Valley for the very first time, I got a text from her about halfway through, and she said, "Joan, if Diego's the killer, I'll fucking kill you." And I said, "Well, you'll have to keep reading, won't you?"
That's good. Yeah,
But
it's
at
just
least people were grateful that at least I hadn't made him the killer. So
I liked that it was nice for Rose, you know? Like I wanted her to have such a win and it felt good. I liked it. So
well, it's funny because the reaction for about Diego, mostly from men, has been Rose made the wrong choice. So many men I know, readers, have said Rose should have just gone with him, or Rose, whereas
well,
so many women I know said, I love the fact that Rose told him my life was already perfect, you know.
yeah, that's tough. But yeah,
But
I see what you mean.
however, I mean, I think I also think for Rose, in terms of her like huge transformational arc across the whole series,
Yeah,
um, I think at this point, at this early stage in her journey, it was important for her to tell him that she
yeah,
needed to have her life here. It took so much for her to leave her husband, leave Sydney, start a new life in the Highlands, work, become the director of this museum, and also to, finally get the house she always wanted and
yeah.
the
It did.
life that she loves.
It did feel really cool. Like it did feel like she sort of stood up for herself, which I really
Yeah.
appreciated. Yeah.
So
Um,
maybe if Diego comes back, maybe he'll have to come back on her terms.
yeah,
Is
well,
the
see, I like
concept.
that. I do like that. There's actually, sorry, I'm just reading more questions about
Yeah.
Diego. There's a lot of questions about particularly the supernatural element. Catherine said, yes, there are some other interesting Australian ghost stories and books about haunted houses and asylums, including Purgatory. I like the way Joan had the ghost in the cabin with Diego. Introducing the ghost story element based on history was really cool. Just a lot of talk about that particular aspect. So, can we talk about that, just including that in your book?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of those things that I had not planned on being an element in any of the books. But when I was writing Echo Lake, I was reminded of experiences that I've had in real life where I experienced something that was, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely from, past lives, a ghost or some sort of echo from the past that had happened.
Interesting.
And I had that experience once in California. I had that experience in Scotland, in the Highlands. And I put that ghost, a much sort of bigger ghost subplot in Echo Lake, but people really seem to respond to it. And I think it suits the kind of environment, the atmosphere of the Southern Highlands, and the kind of cozy crime, spooky haunted house,
Yeah. Yeah.
mystery vibe. So when it came to Whiskey Valley, though, I didn't want to go as big with a full on proper ghost, that you would identify. But I liked the idea because the, so much of Whiskey Valley was inspired when I went to Joadja Creek and did the tour of the distillery and met the real life Diego, whose name is Valero Jimenez. But I'm
Whoa. Stop
sorry,
the press.
everyone,
He exists.
he's married. But so but he
Sorry,
was
guys. Sorry for
fantastic.
that bad news.
I'm really sorry, but he was fantastic, and he gave us a tour of the ghost, the whole ghost tour,
Yeah.
and the there is definitely a strange feeling there. And I actually asked him. I said, "What about you? Everyone says this place is haunted with miners from the past, and
Hmm.
there were so many terrible mining accidents, and there were murders there, and that were unsolved. But I said, what about you? Have you ever experienced anything?" And he sort of, I could tell he wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he said, well, there have been some funny things that have happened in our cabin with a door that we locked and then it's unlocked all by itself. And that's all
Wow.
he said. So I just ran with that and turned it into the whole little subplot that I put into Whiskey Valley.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing that. We got a great question from Emma I want to read out. So Emma says, I'd love to know if you ever considered adding a chapter from Sam's point of view, as I would have loved to know what he was thinking and when he figured stuff out. I think that's really interesting. We are sort of locked on Rose for the
Yeah,
whole book. So did you just sort of rule that out as just, you don't break that sort of form in a novel or?
it's interesting. I mean, I haven't broken that in either of the books. And I made a decision early on in Echo Lake to only tell the story from Rose's point of view, partly because I was really inexperienced as a novelist and at that time. And I thought, oh, if I'm going to start jumping to multiple points
Hmm.
of view, I wasn't sure whether I could sort of keep track of it, and at that point, I wasn't sure who other than Rose, who else's point of view I wanted to go to, and of course Sam wasn't in Echo Lake except on FaceTime because he was living overseas. So when I got to the second book, I thought I was tempted to include someone else's point of view. But interestingly, I don't think it was going to be Sam's. I think it was perhaps going to be her friend George, or perhaps
Oh,
even her sister Kim.
yeah.
Uh, but I thought, no, I've established this sort of, the logic of this world with the first book by just telling the story from Rose's point of view. But then about halfway through writing Whiskey Valley, I thought, damn it, I really would have loved to actually tell it from everybody's point of view and run around.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I read a lot of detective fiction, and usually, especially when there's a detective or a character like Rose, a kind of Miss Marple character, they either stick to that person's point of view or one other's. Like at the moment,
Yes.
I'm reading The Killing Stones, which is the latest Anne Cleeve's Jimmy
Mhm.
Perez book. And because if everyone remembers at the end of the earlier book, which was 7 years ago, Jimmy Perez finally found the second love of his life, Willow, who is also a detective. Uh, in the new book, Willow and Jimmy share, so every other chapter is from one of their points of view. And we get to
Yeah.
be inside Willow's head and Jimmy's head. And I think she's managed that perfectly because there's a real nice balance between the two characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
In Whiskey Valley, though, Sam, I really didn't want to tell the story from his point of view because for me, his presence in Whiskey Valley is about how Rose deals with being the parent of a child
Yeah.
who may be guilty of murder.
Yeah.
And
I like the ambiguity. Yeah.
I didn't want us to know he was innocent.
Yeah.
So if we were in his head, we would know,
We
why
would
did he
know.
do it?
Yeah.
But I wanted the audience or the reader to be just as unsure as Rose was at a certain point, especially when she found the gold medallion under his mattress, that he might be the killer.
Yeah. That was a pretty big shocking moment, honestly. Sort of go, oh no. Yeah, I did exactly what Rose did, where I was like, oh, he's definitely done it. And then I sort of started to backtrack, wait, no. Yeah, that was really interesting how you did that. I actually did that in my second book. I had a lot of characters. I think I had about 8 or 9 different perspectives, but I remember I had a big chart and I had to sort of service each of them the same.
Right.
And so you had to sort of make sure the plot would sort of marry up with that character there. And it was actually quite complex. I had a big like map with cards up on the wall because I
Yeah.
couldn't keep track of it otherwise.
Right.
You
Well,
wouldn't want
it's
to think,
hard. It also is hard, I think, organizationally, but it's also hard in terms of making sure that you have the same sort of emotional intelligence to inhabit each of those types
yeah,
of characters. That
yes.
for me, I think, was the main reason I stuck with Rose, because I actually in Echo Lake I was thinking of making it from both Rose and Detective Blackmore's points of view,
All right.
but I wasn't confident that I could write from the point of view of a man.
Yeah.
Um, which, I mean, frankly, men aren't always great at writing from a woman's point of view, but they do
No.
it all the time. So I probably should have taken a shot, but it was about being confident within that psychology that
Sure.
I wasn't sure I had it.
Yeah, and plus, I think someone said, Catherine said just here, it's nice. It does make the book feel more secure in itself. We're just moored with Rose, we're safe with Rose. It does feel that way. It's that adding to that cozy element of the feeling of reading it. Um, I'd love to ask you this. I actually really appreciated the start of Whiskey Valley that Rose was actually psychologically dealing with what had happened in Echo Lake. Like, I just think that's such a rarity to read of a character who is struggling. with having gone through something. So was that because then you sneakily set up Nesta and all that sort of stuff in there too. So you were sort of using it for multiple purposes. But did that
Yeah.
just come from a place of where would Rose really be? That question of authentic sort of writing.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing. I think for me, even a whodunit thriller is a character-driven piece. I'm a big believer, and it's something that I learned as a screenwriter, that even sort of thriller, even Die Hard is character-driven. The whole movie is about a guy
Absolutely.
who's trying to win back the love of his life, who's trying to win back his wife, and he happens to go up against all these villains, and there's a building, and it's there's lots
Yeah.
of action, but it's really about him trying to win back the love of his life. And so I think for me, I always start a story thinking, where is the character now? Because again, as a series, I didn't want Rose to sort of be born afresh in each book. And I think traditionally it's usually the way it's done. You
Yeah.
have a character who's coming to each new mystery with a sort of fresh perspective. But for me, a character is the sum total of everything they've been through.
Mm.
And in fact, when I started writing Whiskey Valley, I had sort of forgot that. And then I was like, wait a minute. Less than a year ago, she was in this forest and she was, being chased by a killer. And then she picked up a branch and bashed the guy's teeth in. She's going to have some scars, maybe even some PTSD. So I actually had a consult with a psychologist about
Yeah.
where a woman would be at who had gone through, and I described it, and he said, oh, she would undoubtedly have severe PTSD. She would be having nightmares. She would be, anyway. So he talked me through the whole thing, and then also talked to me about different ways that he would deal with it if that woman came to him as a patient.
Yeah, right.
So this guy in no way is anything like Nestor Volk, except for the fact that he said the first thing he would do with a new patient with that level of PTSD would be to teach them foundational breath work, which was really interesting because I thought that might be a really kind of fringe woo-woo thing. He said, no, no, any clinical psychologist will just start with ways to manage the anxiety.
Wow.
But and then I told him what I wanted to do with my character, and that guy would become one of the prime murder suspects. And he said, "Well, that would be highly unethical if he, did this and that." And I said, "Yeah, I know. It's a book. It's
Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, that's one of those things that's really smart of a writer to do, and I guess speaks to all your experience of the double use, even triple use of that one thing, right? You're using Nesta for unpacking Rose, it makes to authenticity, but then you also add him and his wife and the link to them. It's just good writing. Good writing, Joan. Admire it. Um, sorry, I had a question. This struck me as I was reading. There's a lot in here about music. And I mean, we've talked about the music especially, but it actually struck me that it feels like Rose, and I don't know whether this link is too tenuous, but it feels like Rose is kind of finding her own song in the Southern Highlands. And so I really like that idea of like that thematic of, and speaking of just that authenticity and finding that real space to stand up for what you want and to stand up for what you want to sing, I guess. And Rose is sort of finding her song, which is why she ends up saying no to Diego. Was that a thematic that really you thought about as you wrote, or is that something that I'm looking at and that you just that was in the background for you?
It's interesting that I haven't thought about it exactly that way, but what you say she's looking for her own song. What I feel like Rose does is she's a listener and she
Yeah,
hears
she is.
things, and so it's why she's a good Miss Marple, because she listens to people and she hears things about what they say that the police wouldn't hear, or
Hmm.
they simply tell her things because she is a listener. And so in Whiskey Valley with Blackmore. Wait, is this yes with Blackmore and his grandmother and the
Yeah.
whole sort of subplot of his ancestry and all of that. Rose was able to discover all that because she's a good listener, but I think also with locations, with the original Echo Lake, she hears the echoes of the past. And of course, you could also describe that as listening to the song lines, because
Mm.
in any culture, in all cultures, the connection to country is very much about listening to the song of the country. And
Mm.
even though those are often described in, Indigenous Australian terms, I think Rose is also someone who listens, who hears the song lines. And she, when she walks those paths through the forests and, she's hearing the past in a way. And I think that is her song. And I think, it does make sense that that's why she is so sensitive to music and why she's
Yeah.
a lover of music.
I love that. I love that's very deep sort of character thinking there that yeah, that's the old Hemingway iceberg theory, right? That we only see the top
Yeah.
10% of the thing and the 90% of what you've created is all under the surface.
Mm.
Um, Randy has asked this. Patricia talks about being able to picture the Highlands. This is another a writer in the comments here. I've never been to Australia, let alone the Highlands, but I had to so totally use imagination to picture the scenes. You do a great job of describing the mansion and the secret room, and just really evocative writing from Randy. So just compliments for you. But then,
Yeah.
does the tar pit really exist? And I had a similar question. When did that strike you as a plot device? I thought it was
I'll
really cool.
I'll tell you, when Valero Jimenez was taking us on the tour at Joadja Creek, which all really exists, and the distillery is exactly as I describe it. The tour itself, the buildings are exactly as I described them in the book.
What a gold mine that tour was for you, hey?
It was a gold mine. And then he said, all right, I'm going to take you somewhere next, which is pretty unique. And he took us to the tar pit, and it is there. He told us exactly what I have Diego telling Rose in the book, which is that the property was previously owned by an American woman who hired a gang of bikies to do some work around the place. And in exchange, she let them do whatever they wanted in the tar pit. And I
Crazy.
said, wait a minute, wait a minute. He said, look, I said, so did they bury bodies there? I mean, what's the story? He said, I don't think so. He said, but who knows? It's never been searched, it's never been investigated. And
Wow.
now it's just how I describe it in the book, surrounding the tar pit, which is huge. I mean, it goes on, you don't see the end of it, and it sort of
Wow.
winds through the forest. There is a cyclone fence around the perimeter of it, so you can't just walk in. But he let us walk in. I was just with It was me and a girlfriend, and usually he didn't take groups in because he can't control where they go, and he didn't want to lose anyone in the tar pit. But there was just two of us, so he let us in, but he said you're going to have to stand back. And then he went up to the edge, and he got a stick, and he sort of punched it in, and you could see it was stinky. It was a giant tar pit, a river of tar. And then at the end, he's telling us about all this stuff, and he takes the stick and he's having to scrape it off of the soles of his shoes, and he says, I can never get this stuff off. And I looked at my friend and I said, well, there's the last scene in the book. So
Wow.
it wrote itself, Ben. It wrote
Yeah,
itself.
clearly. That's amazing. What a gift. Um, yeah, I just think that's incredible that you just got all of that stuff from that one tour. I mean, were you on the tour to research, or was it just so happened that you were there and then you thought, you know what, it would be great to kill someone here. I might think
No,
about doing
well,
that.
I didn't know about the tar pit, but I knew I was going to use the location because I had done a lot of research online. Because once I moved to the Highlands, I was like, I did a lot of research and asking around, what are interesting locations in the Highlands? And a lot of people said, well, you've got to go to Joadja Creek and do the ghost tour because there was an old mining town. And now there's a whiskey distillery. And I was like, oh my God, all my favorite things in one location, ghosts, history.
Yeah.
So
Did the
I knew there was going to be something big happening there.
was the liquor there as good as you describe it?
Was what?
Was the whiskey there as good as you describe it?
Oh, absolutely. And you can buy Joadja whiskey online, but it's
Yeah,
so
sorry,
much
I'm just writing
fun.
that down. Sorry, let me just write
It's
that down.
it's so much fun to go to the tour and you go to the tasting room and they have because they not only make whiskey but they make gin, they make I think a sherry that's amazing.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and it's just delicious stuff. It's really great, and it's won all of these awards, and it's a must for anyone who I see Gemma saying you had me a gin.
Yeah.
Yeah, the gin is lovely. I love the gin too because they use all of their own spring water.
Oh
They
wow.
grow all of their own barley, and it's all organic. It's a magical, amazing location. And you cannot walk out of there with fewer than 4 or 5 very expensive bottles of booze. But it's worth every penny.
Yeah, sounds you just to describe this magical place, hey, like everything about it. Go and get a cinnamon roll, go to a classical music concert, and then go and it's the beauty of not having a budget, I guess. Um, can
Exactly.
can I ask about involving Sam? Because, like you said, in Echo Lake, he was more of a distant voice, and then in this book, he obviously becomes incredibly important to the plot, and then, you even in great deal of jeopardy towards the end, and one of the main suspects. And when did it
Yeah.
strike you to actually involve Sam, and then obviously elevate Rose's emotional tie-in to the whole narrative?
Well, it was sort of the foundation of the book because what I wanted to do, there was a line I wrote in Echo Lake where I think I said something like is thinking about Sam and how far away he is, and she says, or she's thinking something like, "I feel like the umbilical cord was never, even though he's in England, it has just stretched and it was
Mhm.
never cut at all." And I was thinking about parents and children, and so what I wanted to do with Whiskey Valley was a whole book about parents and children, and then, of course, that's what the murder victim and the murderer are parent and child. And what I wanted to do with the book was, in that way, really look at the idea of conditional love versus unconditional love. And to me, I remember hearing a great interview on the radio. In fact, it was on the ABC where Margaret Throsby was interviewing a child psychologist, and he said, really, the clean water of a good, healthy child is to have the unconditional love of its parents, and
Mm.
conditional love is always going to mess up a child. So I thought, well, how far can I take that? And so I thought, well, with Rose, the farthest challenge to her unconditional love for her son would be if she knew he was the murderer. But her love was so unconditional that she would cover for him if she believed
Yeah, you
that.
make that explicit too, don't you?
I
She said
really
that.
spell it
Yeah,
out. Yeah.
yeah,
Whereas with Billy and his father, who turns out to be the killer, it was the ultimate conditional love. I
yeah.
will only love you if you
If
continue to be the success that I envision. You have to
yeah,
live up to my terms. So the whole book was aimed at exploring the extremes of that. So Sam had to become a main character.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was pretty. Billy was pretty tragic as a character. He he seemed to just live within the confines of what other people sort of placed on him, and then he sadly
Yeah.
died. I mean, did you? I guess he's. It's one of the things I think you do really well is that you don't use him as a prop. Like he's not a prop. He's a proper fresh fleshed out character. Um, I guess what went into creating Billy as a character, this virtuoso and this tragedy.
Well, I mean, Billy is really an amalgamation of all the research I did. And, one of the things that kept coming up when I interviewed a lot of virtuoso string players and other classical musicians, but especially violinists, because they are the sort of, they're the Ferraris of the orchestra. They're the ones that become, they're the most famous, them and the cellists, but they have the most pressure put on them. They have the most solos in chamber pieces, in symphonic pieces. They have the most technical pieces written for them. So they have the most challenging pieces. So
Yeah.
they have the most pressure artistically, but the performance anxiety is crazy. I remember one of the things that I discovered when I was interviewing a woman who was a sort of artist liaison for one of the major, okay, let's just say it, the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. And
Yeah.
I was sitting in on a rehearsal for them, and Vladimir Ashkenazy was the conductor, and they're all performing, they're all playing. And she said, the big challenge is anxiety, and the big challenge is performance anxiety, because the level of perfection that is expected is so unbelievably high. and
Mm.
and I said, really? Well, how does that take place? I mean, how does that manifest itself? And she said, maybe 75% of them are on beta blockers or
Wow.
anti-anxiety medication. And she said, and then they all drink like fish. They take drugs. She said, rock and roll people have nothing on classical musicians
Wow.
because
Yeah.
they're under so much more pressure.
They
And
are.
and also the level of competition is crazy, and it's crazy from the time they're 3 years old when they're supposed to start their Suzuki. So the whole, tiger parents thing and the pressure on kids to do that. So I sort of knew exactly who he was going to be, but I also, um, you know, as a fan of classical music and musicians, I also have such admiration for their artistry and for their style. And, there are so many great internationally violinists who are sort of, were inspirations for Billy, who luckily aren't, you know, as, as strung out as he is,
Yeah,
and
okay.
who also don't have vicious parents. But I think, there's an element of a lot of the musicians I interviewed in
Mm.
Billy. And so I think for me, he was very real.
Yeah, it's a because I used to be in a rock band, and it was when you play, you're up there feeling it, and it's emotional, and it's
Right.
raw, and you do have to be really on point, but there's less people don't care as much. But with classical, it's like you put a single millisecond out or a slight little semitonal pitch out on a
Yeah.
violin. And
Yeah.
it's the precision, I think, that's anxious inducing.
Exactly, but they have to put just as much of that emotional thing, the
Yeah,
the the,
yes.
the emotional performance combined with the need for precision. It's like they're
That's
walking a tightrope
that
all
sounds
the
so hard.
time, and I cannot imagine how hard that must be.
Yeah, see, and
Uh,
I used to just jump around and have fun. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
I got to
No, for sure. And in fact, like with punk music or any rock and roll music, part of its buzz is the kind of
yeah,
ragged nature of it.
yes,
You
exactly.
expect Nirvana to be a little raggedy around the edges. You don't expect that when you go to see Richard
No,
Tornietty with the,
no.
chamber orchestra.
Yeah. There's a great clip I found on the internet that I show my musician students sometimes um of a classical pianist sitting down and it's complete silence, this huge crowd. and then someone's mobile phone starts to go off in the crowd,
Like, yeah.
and the guy just turns and he says, "Let it ring." And it's so embarrassing. It's so bad. Yeah, that type of pressure, no thank you. Let's
Yeah.
um we're actually about out of time, Joan. So if
Oh
you
my
wouldn't
God.
mind, I know it's crazy that this how fast these go. Do you want to just scroll back through and have a think about any of the questions that might be of worth noting for
Well,
you?
I've already thought of one, and I think it's the one that sort of made me think in a way that I hadn't actually, that challenged me in a way that I hadn't thought about it before. And that was Emma's question about whether or not I thought about adding Sam's point of view, because
Nice.
I hadn't, but I had about multiple points of view anyway, and it's sort of, and it's the one where I still feel like I wonder if I got that wrong. Like maybe I should have gone to other people's points.
Wow. That
So
is okay.
I'm,
Emma, well done.
I want Emma to have the prize for basically busting me.
That's awesome. All right, I love that reason too, Joan. That's really cool. I think it was Emma Hutchinson up earlier. Emma, yes. Hi, Emma. Can just make sure, and I'll just write it in the chat here. Go to my website and send me an email afterwards, and just say that you were from the chat, and we can get you a copy of Whiskey Valley, which is awesome. Get Echo Lake as well. Make sure your bookshelf looks really cool with the series, and then make space for how like seven more as well.
Hundreds more.
Hundreds of rows. Cool. Well, Joan, it's really fun to talk with you. I really want to have you back for the next one as well. You're such a vibrant, fun person, and I love reading your books as well. So just a really big thank you. And if everyone wants to just write thanks in the chat to Joan, because she's given up her night to spend with us. So thank you very much, Joan, for being here.
Thank you so much. It's always so much fun. And yeah, I'll see you this time next year.
Heck yeah. And just before everyone goes, next month, if you're interested, this is your first time and you're not part of the Ben's Book Club Facebook group, make sure you go on Facebook and type in Ben's Book Club. You'll see my face with a big beard there. Click that, join the group. We do one of these every month. The next month is this book, which I think has a cool title. I don't know whether you've read this one, Joan. Have you read this one?
I haven't yet, but I'm dying to.
Yeah, The Wolf Who Cried Boy, which sounds really interesting. 6-year-old Henry. Oh no, my son's named Henry. I hope nothing bad happens to Henry.
Oh,
Oh, when news arrives that Henry's grandma is gravely ill. Well, my mum's in the chat here, so I don't know whether you can see her, Carol Hobson, just in the thing. So here you go, mum. Henry's grandma, that's you. Gravely ill. You're not gravely ill, mum. I hope not. Yeah, uh-oh. Anyway, we're looking forward to this one and talking with Mark, but it sounds really, really cool. It's about fables and it's awesome. So next month is Mark. This month was Joan. Make sure to, for everyone, buy Joan's books, get them into, Christmas stockings. I think they're really gripping, they're really fun, they're really emotional, but they are comforting at the same time. So perfect beach reads, I think. But yeah, thanks, Joan, again, and thanks everybody for being a part of Ben's Book Club.
thank you, Ben. It was fun.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you guys. Bye.